This is Tim Calabro, editor of the White River Valley Herald, here with a quick note about tonight's debate. We experienced some technical difficulties with tonight's live stream, and one of the candidates, Rodney Graham, was left without an audio feed into the conversation. Luckily, we were able to catch up with him after the fact and run through all of tonight's questions with him. So in this format, we've spliced his portion of the conversation into the video. Thanks to you, our audience, and especially to all of the candidates for bearing with us. And now, on with the debate.
Good evening, viewers, voters, and candidates from the Orange-1 House District. Welcome to the White River Valley Herald's third and final debate of the 2020 election cycle. My name is Dylan Kelley, and I'm a staff writer and photographer with the Herald, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. As you've noticed, we're doing this live via the internet, so bear with us if any technical issues transpire during the debate. The questions these candidates are about to answer were submitted by Herald readers both in the Orange-1 district as well as those in the broader community. So we're going to kick things off right away and let our candidates briefly introduce themselves, starting with Susan Hatch Davis. Over to you, Susan. Oh, I believe you're muted, Susan.
Thank you.
Go for it.
My name is Susan Hatch Davis, and I'm running for the Vermont Progressive Party. I'm a former legislator, worked in state government for 31 plus years as a manager of network services and the state of Vermont security director. I'm a trustee for the East Orange Cemetery and for the East Orange Church. I'm a community volunteer at our local school and at the church. At the church, I plan all the events and the suppers, and you've probably seen me there serving up hash before. I'm a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. I come from a family of 10 children, and I know the economic and social challenges our families and communities face. I've worked hard all my life. I'm fair and a voice of reason and humility. I'm running because I believe in progress. I'm not the radical left. My issues are your issues, and today they're mainstream. I've been an advocate for raising the minimum wage and or universal basic income, healthcare reform, expanding labor rights, public education, support for our small rural schools, paid family leave, affordable child care, our planet, and I will work tirelessly on behalf of all in Vermont when I get to Montpelier. I've been a legislator for 10 years and have a positive record of fighting for policies that invest in the social infrastructure, more equality and diversity because it promotes opportunity and growth and social well-being. This pandemic has brought to the surface a need for legislative leaders who will fight for more equality and diversity, who will fight for sound policies that invest in our social infrastructure, like access to affordable health care, public housing, access to food. We saw that during the beginning stages of the pandemic, and we still see it. Digital information, we saw that with connection for broadband, affordable access to education, access to childcare, increased wages, good jobs, and more. I don't have a personal agenda or a political agenda in Montpelier. I am afraid that upcoming economic decisions will result in a move toward more austerity, cutting critical services for people when they need them the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We're going to go now to Carl Demereaux. Take it away, Carl.
Good evening. Thank you, Dylan, for hosting. Thank you to the Herald for putting this on this evening. Hello to my fellow candidates. Hello to the viewers, and hello to the voters in the Orange-1 district. My name is Carl Demrow. I'm 55 years old, and I live in Corinth with my partner, Tanya Abbey. I am a Democrat, and I am just finishing my first term in the Vermont House. I've enjoyed spending some time in the House, but before I talk about that, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about me. I have worked my life as in a variety of different capacities. I've been a high school teacher. These days I'm a carpenter and construction worker when not working in the legislature. I am on the board of Northeast Slopes in Corinth, and I volunteer there as a lift operator. I'm also on the board of the Blake Memorial Library in Corinth. I was the co-founder of Orange County Headwaters, which was a project that protected over 5,000 acres of land in the towns of Corinth and Washington. And I served on the board of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy from 1999 till 2006. This past term in the legislature, I really dedicated myself to the work that I did in committee and the work that I did for my constituents. I wanted to be sure that if someone got in touch with me, that they got a response quickly from me, and I really enjoyed the work that I've done helping people with problems that they've had with unemployment insurance or pandemic unemployment insurance or problems with state agencies. I've really tried to make myself accessible to the voters of the district by sending out a weekly newsletter during the legislative session and holding monthly office hours in the towns around the district. I want to go back to Montpelier to continue working on things that are important for all Vermonters. Access to healthcare, to affordable healthcare for everyone. I want to continue to work on building a better public education system. Our children are our future, and a good education is a key to a successful adulthood. We need to work on more equity in our education funding system. I want to continue to work to preserve our, excuse me, and bolster our rural economies, both the farm sector, the forestry sector. We need more broadband in our communities. The pandemic has shown us a lot of places where we're not ready for the 21st century out here. We need to have broadband so that we can build better businesses in our communities, and be connected to the rest of the world. So I would like to ask the voters of the Orange-1 district to vote for me, to send me back to Montpelier for a second term, to continue the work on behalf of everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Carl. We're going to go now to Rodney Graham. Rodney, take it away. You're muted, Rodney. We can't quite hear you. Oh, maybe you're not. Keep on going. Okay, we're going to come back to Rodney Graham. It appears that we're having some connection issues. Sorry about that, Rodney. But we're going to move on, and we're going to hit up, let me check here. We're troubleshooting this as we speak. We're going to move on to Samantha Lefebvre over here. Give us a quick second to switch the cameras around. Hang on one second. Welcome to the internet, everybody. Okay, Samantha, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I want to start off by thanking you for hosting this and thanking the viewers for tuning in. I am Samantha Lefebvre. I am 25 years old. I live in Orange with my husband and my son. I am a landlord. I am a small business owner. And I was born and raised in Vermont. I have a background in excavation and in the health field. I am running as state representative because I would like to see some common sense and some change brought back into Montpelier. I feel that our rural voices are not being heard and represented, and that in this time, our community members need a strong voice to make sure that we are all clearly represented. I am an advocate for people being able to come to me regardless of what their political views are, and they can talk to me. I have expressed that when I am elected into Montpelier, I will have office hours for people to be able to come and check in, talk with me. I want to be accessible to our community members. I believe that our government should be more transparent and that we need to be more physically responsible with our taxpayer dollars. COVID has really shown a light on where we can improve, and I want to be one of the people to help our state move forward.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. We're going to go back over to Rodney. Hopefully Rodney's audio is coming in again. We're going to see if we can take another swipe at Rodney's introductory statement here. Looks like we're still having some trouble with Rodney. Sorry about that, Rodney. We're gonna move on to Kate MacLean, and we're gonna see if we can do something about your audio. I'm not sure. We have the boss working on it, but for the time being, take it away, Kate.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I'm Kate MacLean. I'm a 36-year-old select woman here in Chelsea. I'm a livestock farmer and a mom of 2 little kids. I live up in Chelsea's West Hill, and I'm grateful to both live and farm with my partner, Nick Ziegelbaum, our 2 little kids, Leland and Amelia, my sister, my brother-in-law, and my parents. As a young farmer, the future of agriculture is very important to me. As a mother of 2 school-aged children, the success of our local schools is very important to me. As a select woman, the vitality of our small towns is incredibly important to me. So I'm running as a Democrat, and I'm running because farmers are woefully underrepresented in Montpelier, and because my generation is woefully underrepresented in Montpelier. But most importantly, I'm running because I see the liberal ideals that I hold dear, that are legislated in Montpelier, not take into nuanced consideration the rural realities of life in our district. So that's a little bit about me. I'm really grateful to the Herald for putting this on, to Dylan for moderating, and most importantly, I'm really grateful for Carl and Rodney and Susan and Rama and Samantha for being such kind, warm people to campaign alongside. So thank you all.
Oh. All right, Rodney, if you're there, let's see if you can chime in here. We're going to try this another time. Hopefully, we can get something to come through here.
Yeah, can you see or hear me?
We can hear you. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, my name's Rodney Graham. I'm lived in Williamstown my entire life so far. 4th generation on a family farm. Be running for my 4th term. Currently the vice chair of the Ag and Forest Committee. I'm also serving as chairman of the select board, served on the school board for 10 years, and various other ag committees and stuff is there. Reason I'm running again is I feel that we're going to need to be able to compromise it for running with trying to get our economy back after this pandemic. I believe that I bring a common sense approach to the state house, and have been able to work well with both sides of the aisle, and I ask for your vote.
All righty, thank you, Rodney. I'm glad we got your introductory statement in. We're going to go over to Rama Schneider. Rama, take it away.
Yeah, hi, my name's Rama Schneider. I live in Williamstown. And first, I just want to point out that if you have any more questions or you want to get hold of me, I have a website at connectedvermont.org. That's connectedvermont.org. And it's got a contact form, more information about me. So feel free to stop by.
Really?
I would like to say I am on a mission, folks. I'm looking for a healthy and sustainable future for the kids, and I want you to share this mission with me. The approach to achieving this mission I see is going through the schools, through our money, and through our taking care of our physical environment. But we also have a couple of other big jobs we have to deal with in the immediate future right now. One of them, job number one, we have to continue to handle the COVID pandemic, and we have to handle it in a smart and a sensible manner so that we actually deal with the COVID pandemic and work our way through it and get past. Our second job is we need to jealously protect our democratic institutions. Our democratic institutions are under assault right now, and it's interfering not only with our voting processes, but we also are being attacked from the issue of centralizing a lot of services that we just a couple decades ago used to take for granted would be occurring at the local level, such as local school districts, town meetings, and how much power towns and school districts have as opposed to the state having. Uh, that's what I'm going for. A little bit about me. My wife and I moved to Williamstown in 1992. We raised our daughter here, and we've been involved in various manners in the community since then. I've been elected to the school board. I served on the Williamstown Northfield School District Merger Committee. And upon the successful merger vote there, I was on the new unified board. I've been the Williamstown Food Shelf treasurer and general volunteer since 2014. I've participated on the Williamstown ATV Trails Committee in 2019. Prior to that, I've been part of the formation of what became EC Fiber, uh, the community-owned communications network, and took part with an early attempt at a Williamstown Economic Development Committee, served on the initial board for CV Fiber, which is the new one that Williamstown and some other central Vermont communities are involved with, the community-owned communications network they're trying to build. I've also done some miscellaneous community volunteering that's included working at the Ainsworth Library, watering plants downtown. I've done a lot of dishes for church suppers, which is fine for me because I like to eat. A couple of personal traits I think that are really important. One is I have discovered throughout my life, and this is probably the greatest wisdom I've picked up, we all do better when we genuinely adopt within ourselves the concepts of hope, humility, and a sense of responsibility to the greater good. You know, regardless of how one achieves these, it's hope that will see us through trying times, humility that will remind each one of us we are imperfect humans and must accept some help from others. And the responsibility to the greater good gives us the opportunity to feel that there's something more important than us that we can reach outside. I also think that I learned a version of leadership, and leadership that makes sense to me is a relationship between a leader and followers in pursuit of a goal. And the important thing there is not the leader, it's not the followers, it's the goal. A good leader with a good goal can accomplish an awful lot. A great leader with poor goals is still a poor leader, and a poor leader with great goals is still a poor leader. So I bring those various concepts with me. I know how to work within the confines of the committee process, and I also understand what needs to be done. That we need to make some basic changes to the processes that we've all become very accustomed to. If we're going to
It looks
move,
like what needs to be done at this point is to move on, Rama. We're going to take a quick break while we sort out some technical issues there. So candidates, stay right with us. And For those listening out there in the world, we're going to be right back in about 60 seconds or so. Candidates Forum here for the Orange-1 House District. Sorry for that little bit of interruption, but we had some technical issues that we wanted to sort out. For our first round of questions, each candidate will have about 2 minutes to respond to each of these reader-submitted questions. And we're going to go right down the line here. Question number 1 is, looking at the current session so far, I would like the candidates to name a piece of legislation that passed that you support, or name one that you wish hadn't passed. And is there a current piece of legislation that you strongly oppose or support? First up to bat on this particular question is Rama Schneider. So go ahead and take it away, Rama.
I don't know what.
All right. So I think for me, I haven't really followed too much of the outside of pandemic legislation that's gone on. I will say I think that between the governor and the General Assembly, they've done a good job of making sure that the state is taken care of as best as they can, and that money is put out there where it needs to be put, and that guidance has been provided. So I'm very happy with a lot of the work they've done in that regard. I do appreciate the, I believe it's called the Global Warming Solutions Act, I think is what they call it. I think that was a very good piece of legislation. It's imperfect in that it really doesn't accomplish anything. It's yet one more kicking the butt to the legislature to tell them, listen, you guys got to stop talking. And Governor, you got to stop talking. You guys have to really start acting on this. And this is part of why I want to go down to Montpelier and participate with in the legislature, is to make sure that we're not just building plans that are going to come in front of the legislature, and then we're all going to wring our hands and say, oh, how expensive and difficult it is to accomplish these plans, that we actually put some action to our words. And that's what the Global Warming Solutions Act is a step towards doing, by giving the general population of Vermont the opportunity to tell the state, you're not doing your job, get off your butts, do some work. The physical environment needs to be taken care of. The global climate crisis, and it is a crisis, needs to be dealt with, and we need to be doing our part.
Okay, thank you, Rama. We're going to toss this question now to Susan Hatch Davis. Susan, tell us what you feel about the current session, and name a piece of legislation that you support, or maybe one that you wish hadn't passed. And is there any current legislation that you strongly oppose or support? Susan Hatch Davis. You are muted, Susan.
Sorry, it seemed like that question got a little bit longer. I really support the Global Warming Solution Act that passed, because I think that in everything that we do today, we see that climate has had an impact. People who are out hunting, people who are out hiking. We've seen a real problem with water this year. I know I just recently went on a ride foliage ride, and we went to a couple of lakes up in the Northeast Kingdom, and one of them was down 5 feet of water. My mom's water, which she's always had a very strong well, her water was low this year. She's had to be very careful with her water. And I know that there are some people that even their artesians went dry. So I'm very happy that we passed that legislation this year, and that we will, the legislators and government will be held accountable. So I am pleased about that. I am happy I introduced a marijuana legalization bill. So I am happy that the marijuana bill, legalization bill passed. I think that it could use some work. And so that's one of the things that I hope I'll get a chance to work on when I return to Montpelier.
All righty, thank you very much, Susan
Thank you.
Hass-Davis. We're gonna toss this over to Carl Demrow now. Carl, take it away.
I was a sponsor of the Global Warming Solutions Act, and I voted for it when it came to the House. I also voted to override the governor's veto when it came back for a veto override vote. But I want to talk about a different bill, and that is S338, which is Justice Reinvestment 2. This was an important bill that didn't get a lot of press, but it came out of a study that was done by not just the legislative branch, but also the judicial and the executive branch. And it was a study that looked at our prison system and ways to fix our furlough system. We have now, hopefully that'll change. We have one of the highest rates of reincarceration of people on furlough status. And those reincarcerations can happen not because someone committed a new crime, but because they lost a job or lost their form of transportation. So we really looked at ways to fix that so that people who are on furlough and trying to do the right thing don't necessarily get bumped back into jail because they lost a job or lost their transportation. One of the most expensive things we can do here in Vermont is to incarcerate someone. It costs about $70,000 a year to keep someone in one of our prisons. And S338 should, over time, not just help people to get a foot in a new life, but it should also save the state a lot of money. One bill that I did not want to see pass is H926. That was the Act 250 bill, which some folks may be familiar with. I voted for it when it came out of the House. It had some really good reforms to Act 250 in it, but as it came back from the Senate, most of that was stripped out, and what I really wanted to see was reform to Act 250 and not just the two tiny pieces that were left when they came back to the House.
Okay, thanks, Carl Demrow. We're going to toss this over to Rodney Graham now. Rodney, given the current session, name a piece of legislation that passed that you support and name one that you wish hadn't passed. And is there a current piece of legislation that you strongly oppose or support? Rodney Graham. We're going to circle back around to Rodney. We're going to toss this one now over to Samantha Lefebvre. Samantha, how do you feel about the legislation that's in the works right now? And is there something that you would support or oppose?
So one piece of legislation that I do support was when, I forget the exact name of it, but when licensing became easier for people that were transferring for nurses, electricians, and that allows people to be able to obtain jobs and to grow in Vermont. I think that is really important as working in the healthcare field, that people can come and help out our hospitals and healthcare facilities. One piece of legislation that I am not a fan of is the Global Warming Solutions Act. There's no solutions in that. I feel that we've handed over our accountability to a board of members that are not elected in. And I feel that it's set up Vermont for lawsuits and more costs that we don't need to obtain. I'm not saying that I'm not an advocate for our state. We do need to do something. One thing that I would maybe suggest is looking at the money that we are spending on the Global Warming Solutions Act in that itself and put it towards our wastewater systems in Vermont. And if I was elected, I would look at repealing that. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Samantha. Over to Kate MacLean. Kate MacLean, how do you feel about the legislative session? And is there any particular piece of legislation that you would support or oppose, and anything that's being worked on right now?
Thanks, Dylan. Let's see. I guess I'll start with the support. Like many on here tonight, the Global Warming Solutions Act was the piece of legislation that got me most excited about this last session. And it's the piece of legislation that I am very excited to continue working with, should I be elected, with what the committee ends up recommending to the legislature. Rural voters, especially those in my district, are very intimately familiar with the effects of climate change. And I feel that it is an imperative, both for my future constituents, but for Vermont and the country to lead on these issues. I would say that the piece of legislation that I would oppose was S54 for tax and regulating cannabis, but not because I am against legalizing cannabis, but rather the way in which the legislation was written. I find very problematic because it did an inadequate job at addressing the history of racism that cannabis is pretty inextricably tied to. And I know that the Vermont Growers Association, No for Vermont, Rural Vermont, and Justice for All don't support this piece of legislation as it was written. So those are my two pieces.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're going to go to Rodney Graham now. Rodney Graham, how do you feel about the current legislative session? And is there any particular piece of legislation that you would support or oppose?
So I was a strong opposer on the global warming bill. I do believe that there needs to be some action taken to lower our carbon emissions, but I think given our authority, legislative authority over to a 23-member climate board that will never have to answer to us or the governor, we won't have any say on whatever they want to do. And if we don't meet their goals and we don't know what they're going to set, everyone in the state can sue the state. And we'll be spending our money and time fighting lawsuits instead of fighting the climate. I think there's better ways to do it, and I think that legislatures, are actually violating their oath of office by delegating their authority to some other group. So totally against that one. We were really hoping to see some Act 250 reforms this year, but as Mr. Demeraux explained before, that got a lot of the good stuff got stripped out. So did oppose that bill as well. We made some changes in our committee, just clarifying duties of tree warden, and we also worked on the farmer to plate and those school to plate and those type of programs that we strongly supported over the years and continue to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rodney. We're going to keep it right here with you. We're going to ask the next question so we don't lose you. Next year, the state is likely to see a significant deficit due to COVID-19. How would you propose to fill the likely budget hole? Straight with you, Rodney Graham.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to make some hard decisions. It's going to be a multi-year job to get us back where we were. One thing is we got to focus on getting our business economy back up and running full steam. Retail stores, manufacturing outfits and restaurants and all this stuff have been slow, and we count on a lot of tax revenue from them, so we need to focus on trying to get them up and back. And I think in some degrees, rather than and trying to cut any necessary programs or even reducing them, I think that maybe we need to postpone some of the regulations that are being put on all types of businesses, such as, family paid leave or minimum wage, just delay it for a year or two so our businesses can get back up and running, and go from there.
Well, we're going to swing it over to Kate MacLean then. Kate, how would you address a probable budget hole due to COVID-19?
Well, I think that we're very lucky to have, or we needed the federal influx of cash that we got, and so I'm hopeful that the federal government will continue to support states. I think that we very much will need that assistance, and I think that it will be very important to not go into austerity measures with this potential deficit. I think it would be a mistake for us to cut funding for the services that make Vermonters love to live here.
Okay, thank you, Kate. We're going to go over to Rama Schneider now. Rama, you are up. Next year, the state's likely to see a significant deficit due to COVID-19. How would you propose to fill the likely budget hole?
So, I mean, yes, of course, we'd be happy to accept any money that comes down from the federal government. And I do believe that's going to be a likely need. I don't know if we actually get it or not. It's going to have to be a mix if we're facing a budget, a deficit, a difference between our revenues and what we expect to spend. In order to make it into not being a deficit. And we're going to have to look at a combination of tax increases, and we're going to have to look at some reductions in spending. This is going to happen regardless, because as we move ahead into the future, there are programs we're going to have to let go by the wayside in order to bring forward some newer programs. I don't know where to start. I mean, I would do really great on either one of the money committees for sure, because then I would have a much better idea where to start. But I would not be afraid at looking at cuts in a wide variety of services if need be to bring financial stability into the state budget. But I also I would not be hesitant about raising some taxes too, if that's necessary. I suspect it's going to be a combination federal money, tax increases, and service reductions in order to come up with a sensible budget in the next couple of years.
All right, thank you, Rodney. We're going to swing this one up to Susan
Rama.
Hatch Davis. Sorry, Rama. There's so many faces going in front of me. So Susan Hatch Davis, same question. Likely deficit due to the COVID-19 pandemic. How would you propose to fill the budget hole?
Well, I think it will need to be a combination of federal dollars and revenue coming into the state. And I think we should be reminded that the state does have the ability to get money through sources like raising non-property tax revenue, changing the estate tax, borrowing, using federal dollars. And we could borrow, we have bonds. We could look at bonding opportunities. I know a few years ago, the state changed to a 2-year bonding cycle, but they've still kind of done it like a checkbook. Maybe now's the time to look at, could we get creative with bonding opportunities? And I'm not really keen on cutting programs that are necessary programs for our most vulnerable. Also, I think that this year there was money money that came in to the state coffers that was unanticipated. And we may see some of the same thing next year because the money that's coming to people through unemployment and that kind of thing, that's all being taxed. So that money is coming in where they're not getting a paycheck, they are getting taxed through unemployment. So will see that as well. And I also think that we could spread the cost of the pandemic over the next 5 years or something. It kind of like amortizing the pandemic. So I think that it will be a combination of looking at different things. But I'm not keen on making any kind of austerity cuts for people who need it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susan Hatch Davis. Over to Carl Demerow. Carl, what's your response to the question on a likely budget hole due to COVID-19?
Well, I think that we may turn out to do a little bit better with this than we're thinking now. You know, like Susan said, there's been $1.2 billion worth of money that's come into the state from the feds, and that money has just been pushed out into the Vermont economy. And people are going to be paying taxes on their unemployment insurance. Businesses are going to be doing a little bit better than they might in some other states. We got about $2,000 per capita here in Vermont, while in New Hampshire they got about $930 per capita. And we've also had a lower infection rate here. And so much of our economy has been able to reopen and stay open as a result. But let's say we get to January and we see that the revenues have not been what we expected. We are going to have some form of cuts. We do have a rainy day fund that is meant to cover these types of expenses and sort of smooth more difficult financial times into years that can be better. And we may need to raise some taxes. And there are, you know, we have a whole group of people in this state who've done really well with the Trump tax cuts. And it may be time for them to be doing their fair share. And I'm talking about the really higher end of the income spectrum. But I'd really like to wait till January to really see what the revenues look like and what the projections are for fiscal year 2020.
All righty, thank you very much. We're going to go over to Samantha. Samantha, how would you propose to fix the likely budget hole from the COVID-19 pandemic?
So I am a strong supporter of making Vermont more business friendly. And by doing that, we will be able to have a wider income into Vermont. So by doing that, we could, be more friendlier to our small businesses and our corporations. And by maybe cutting some of the regulations there, I am not a supporter of raising our taxes. I feel Vermonters are already burdened enough by that. While federal funds would be great to get in, there's no guarantee we're going to continue getting them. So that's where it's going to be really imperative that we have people and working for us and in the legislature to be able to be physically responsible with our tax dollars. And I agree with some of our candidates that have spoken ahead, where we cannot be cutting all of our programs, but maybe looking at ones that maybe could possibly merge, maybe offering for some of our programs to be doing some self-funding. But I am not an advocate for cutting our programs, but I am an advocate for trying to make Vermont more business friendly to widen our tax base.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our next question, we're going to come back to Rodney because I want to make sure he has a chance to pitch in his 2 cents here. But our next question is, how can or should the legislature better support small business owners, many of whom were struggling before the pandemic? And we're going to go straight back to you, Samantha, until we get Rodney back. But for now, Samantha, take it away.
So this is a great question. So as a small business owner, it is hard for me to have employees, the cost of it. And my situation myself. So my husband is the one share owner of one of our businesses, and to have me work with him, it costs $500 a month just for unemployment insurance. And so it wasn't feasible, let alone hiring on more employees when my business needed it. And I could offer a great job to people with a variety of a background. I did have the opportunity when, we were a little bit busier a couple of years ago to have employees, and it was a great opportunity for me. But again, the taxes on having an employee and the taxes paying and different regulations, they're hard. So right now, and even before COVID, allowing small businesses maybe to have a little bit of leeway. I know that people have really appreciated not having the sales and use tax and some of the income tax a little bit that we have been given from COVID, the grace period we've been given. So maybe continue that forward just to get people on their feet. I know the people in the restaurant and the arts industry that are small owners there maybe could just use a little bit more maybe guidance from the state on what they could do. I know the winter is coming, and that means cold, so that means no more outdoor seating or outdoor events. And so maybe the state coming through to be able to help again with some regulations, or less regulations but more ideas of what they can do to get the customers back. I know that our COVID relief money has gone back into the Vermont's economy, but people need to be able to get out and to be able to spend that money. So I am again a strong supporter of less regulations on small Vermont businesses and corporations.
Okay, thank you very much, Samantha. Kate MacLean has the next bite at this particular apple. How can or should the legislature better support small business owners, many of whom were struggling even before the pandemic? Kate MacLean.
So I'm a small business owner myself. We have a farm here and we have one employee. I think that as a select woman, I think about this issue a lot. Looking at our downtown here in Chelsea and speaking with the few small business owners that are right in town and their trials and tribulations in opening and staying open. I was hopeful that the Act 250 reform was going to address some of this, and I hear that they will be taking this issue back up in the next session, and I would like to work specifically on that to help reduce the barriers for our small businesses in our small towns.
All righty, thank you very much, Kate MacLean. Over to Rama Schneider. Rama, how do you feel the legislature can or should support small business owners?
Well, I want to start by assuring all the small business owners who might watch this that if you elect me to the legislature, the last thing I'm going to do is tell you how to run your business. And I think that's really important. What the state should be doing is setting up a framework of expectations and rules and regulations that the businesses have to operate under, and they need to stay consistent. And these need to be guidelines and rules and regulations that are set up with a vision that looks into the future so that it's predictable. People know what's going to happen instead of having these constant arguments of whether or not we regulate something. We need to say, yes, we need to deal, for instance, with the climate crisis. We need to deal with things like education. So there's going to be taxes involved there. These are all things that affect small businesses. We need to do better with the physical infrastructure that goes out to a lot of these communities. And that's not only just to help small businesses, but it's also to help communities be, it's what I would, if I was to coin a phrase, it's a word that exists, but I'd call it locality, the idea that we need to become a little more resilient at the local level. And it might come to a time, especially in the immediate future, dealing with what we're doing, that we have to provide direct cash payments to small businesses to help them get through. I also think there's bigger policy issues, such as a single payer healthcare system, for instance, that would relieve a lot of businesses from the concern and the worry about whether or not they can hire employees and give them health insurance. There's a lot that can be done at the state level. There's certain relationships between employers and employees, I think, that we can relieve the businesses of. Um, so, yes, there are some things we can do, but I think we need to be careful and realize that small businesses need to operate within the same society that we all need to. It's okay to set some rules, it's okay to set some guidelines. They need to be sensible, they need to be predictable, and they need to fit into a vision so people understand where they're working to in the future. So, as they build their businesses, they know they're building into something that will continue to be supported.
All righty. Thank you very much, Rama Schneider. Over to Susan Hatch Davis. Susan, take it away. How can or should the legislature better support small business owners, many of whom are struggling even before the pandemic?
Well, I think through policy and funding, there's probably going to have to be some funding. And I think one thing that we could say that needs to be done is from we, the people ourselves, we need to support our local businesses. And that would go a long way to helping businesses. I think we've seen times like, for instance, during the Irene flooding, the state helped local businesses, and we've made changes to the unemployment trust fund where businesses didn't have to pay as much money into the trust fund. So I think the state can do those types of things and policies and work with the small businesses to find out what their needs are. But one of the biggest things for me is that we, the people of Vermont, should support our local businesses, especially in times like this. That would be very helpful. The state could make changes to policies, like I think Rama suggested, healthcare. Um, right now, also childcare. Childcare is difficult for some people, so it causes them right now, especially during this pandemic, it means that they may not be able to work if they don't have childcare. So there are many different policies and avenues that the state could help with as well. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you very much, Susan Hatch Davis. Over to Carl Demereau. Carl.
Well, I first I want to say that the federal money we got from the federal government, I believe that between a quarter and a third of that money went out as grants to small businesses and of every different type throughout the state, and that is really going to help us move into the next phase of this pandemic. But when we talk about what businesses were struggling with before this happened, one of the big ones, as Susan mentioned, is childcare. It's hard to find employees when the employees don't have a place for their kids to go. And the state has got to do a better job on childcare. It will not only help us with our small businesses, but it will help bring people to this state too. It'll help attract small families. And that's what we really need here. We need folks to come here and raise families. We need kids in our schools, and we need taxpayers to lower the burden for the rest of the 625,000 of us here in Vermont. One thing that the forestry sector did recently is they reduced their workers' comp costs by partnering with the insurance agencies to figure out a training program for people who work in the industry. And I think we could do more of that as well to lower workers' comp costs for different sectors of our economy. And finally, if we need to stimulate growth in our businesses, we could also have some sales tax holidays, and that's been done before in the state. And I think that would be a wise way of stimulating folks to buy from Vermont businesses. Thanks.
All righty. Thank you very much, Carl. We're going to try and get in touch here with Rodney Graham. Rodney, this one's up to you now. How can or should the legislature better support small business owners, many of whom are struggling even before the pandemic? Take it away, Rodney.
Well, again, it goes back to kind of my last answer. I mean, we've added such a tax burden to businesses. We've added such a regulatory regulations to them that's hard to accomplish, time consuming and expensive, especially Act 250. And I think we need to reduce some of that, even if it's just for a temporary time. I mean, uh, you know, uh, we can only do so much with what we have. I mean, and trying to put the burden on all the burden on small businesses is just not working, and we're losing more and more businesses, and that's helping our economy.
Mm-hmm. But we're going to move on to question 4. This election cycle is highly unusual, as is this candidates forum, because we can't hear one of them. With many states sending out high numbers of mail-in ballots, some, including President Trump, have called into question the security of mail-in voting, despite low numbers of voting fraud throughout the country. What, if any, changes to Vermont's voting laws would you like to make for further election years? And we're going to start this one off with Samantha. Go ahead, Samantha.
So I believe that the absentee ballot request program that Vermont had was a very good one. If you did not feel comfortable going to the polls, or you were not able to go to the polls, then you could call up your town clerk and you could request a ballot in. Speaking about some of the fraud that is happening, I do know a couple of cases where people are getting ballots sent to their home for people that are not there. People are not getting ballots sent to them, but they had a request card sent to them in the primary. So I'm a believer in, just letting it be. We had one of the best policies to begin with. And I do believe in all of our town clerks and our, town organizations and our JPs, that they will hold true to checking the voter checklist, and that they will hold accountable if someone needs a ballot, getting it to them. So I would hope that next year or next election that we will not have COVID or any pandemic occurring, and people will be able to go back and vote in person. But if not, maybe we can go back to what we were using before, and people can call in and request a ballot. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you very much, Samantha. Over to Kate MacLean. Kate, with the election cycle being this unusual and the high number of mail-in ballots, including President Trump's, what, if any, changes to Vermont's voting laws would you like to make for future election years? Kate MacLean.
Yeah, I think that the mail-in ballots are a tremendous boost for our democratic process. I've heard that the rate of fraud is so low that it's negligible, and I trust our fellow Vermonters to not be actively trying to defraud our system. I think that when talking with voters in the last couple of months, one of the things that has been an overwhelmingly positive response has been the way that they can take their time with their ballot at home to research everybody that's on the list, especially when we're talking about something like state representative race, these local races that don't get a lot of press. I think it means a lot to voters to be able to have those names on their desk and to do their research and to make informed decisions. So I hope that we expand our mail-in ballot program into non-pandemic years, because I want to see fewer barriers to voters when they are casting their votes.
Question 4 is, this election cycle is highly unusual. With many states sending out high numbers of mail-in ballots, some, including President Trump, have called into question the security of mail-in voting, despite low numbers of voting despite low numbers of voting fraud throughout the country. What, if any, changes to Vermont's voting laws would you like to make for future election years?
Well, I think that the way we were doing it before this pandemic hit was working well. I mean, we've had absentee ballots. You could request them. That's been in place for a number of years now. And the way the primary went, I thought went really well. I mean, they sent out notices, and then the people had to request a ballot from their local town clerk, and I thought that went real well. This statewide mailing out ballots, I know I've already heard people that received 4 or 5 ballots, don't even know who some of the people are that they're receiving ballots that a person has deceased a couple of years ago. So there's a lot of question about mailing them out statewide. I think we should at least go back to where they have to request the ballot in the future.
Okay. And over to Rama Schneider. Rama, what, if any, changes do you feel Vermont's voting laws should be made for future election years?
Few changes. When I first got elected on the school board in Williamstown, it was 2009, and we were still doing the school budget votes on the floor. And I really liked town meetings, and I really appreciated floor votes. The give and take, the back and forth, and the adjustments that can be made on a floor vote they're great. It's just fantastic. However, we were voting on, a 7-8, what was becoming a $9 million plus budget. And it had become such a minority of the town. It was less than 100 people. Well, it was a little over 100 actually, that were voting on this $9 million budget for the entire town. I pushed for, and the town ended up agreeing to go to Australian balloting for all school budgetary issues. And as much as I regret the loss of the floor vote on town meeting days on those school budgets, it certainly gave much more of the town an opportunity to have some say-so on what was a very big and a very expensive slice of the pie. I personally like in-person voting. I think I'm not going to do it this year. I actually am going to mail in my ballot this year, but I like the in-person voting. I like floor voting. However, it seems the needs of a vast majority of people in the state require something which gives them a little more remote access to the voting process. I think the mail-in voting, wide use of mail-in voting is a good way forward. It can be made extremely secure. It's secure right now. We're in the unfortunate circumstance where we have a president of the United States actively encouraging people to violate the law just to gum up the voting works.
Just a few more seconds remaining, Rama.
All right, let's just, I think either continue and expand on the mail-in voting, or at the bare minimum, I would leave it as it is, where you could request a ballot.
Okay, thank you very much, Rama Schneider. Up to Susan Hatch Davis. Susan, what, if any, changes to Vermont's voting laws would you like to make for future election years? Susan Hatch Davis.
Well, I think that mail-in voting that we're doing this year, I think that's a very good idea, and absentee voting. So I think that's something going forward. I also am interested in ranked choice voting like they have in Maine. I think that we could look at that as an option. And maybe in the past, we've heard from folks who have felt that maybe we should have election day off or something, so that more people could go to the polls. Although if we have mail in, that would solve that issue as well. I can tell you that we got our ballots in the mail today. They came to the right address, so that was a good thing. So I guess that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Susan Hatch Davis. Over to Carl Demereau. What changes, if any, do you think should be made to Vermont's voting laws heading into future election years?
Well, I think we're really lucky to live in Vermont. We have one of the easiest states to register to vote in. We have one of the easiest states to order an absentee ballot in. This year is, as you noted, a little different. And what the legislature decided to pass a bill to have universal mail-in voting back in May, when we really didn't know what fall was going to look like. We didn't know if there was going to be another surge in the pandemic, and you can't just do mail-in voting, with 30 days notice or 15 days notice. Ballots have to be printed. They have to be mailed. There have to be provisions for ways to send them back. And so we did that. We did that back then, and I think it was a good decision for this year. I'm really happy with our state and the way that we really foster and encourage voting here. I wish that we had a higher rate of voting participation, but I don't think I'd change anything. When you look at other states around the country, a lot of them make it much more difficult to vote than Vermont does, and I'm not concerned about fraud. I think we have very competent town clerks and boards of civil authority who do excellent work and are very dedicated, and I have a lot of trust in them. Thanks.
All righty, thank you very much, Carl. And just an update to our viewers and our voters out there. We are in touch with Rodney. We're gonna edit his responses in a separate video into this one and post that on YouTube so you can get all of the candidates and their positions on these issues in real time relatively, but we're just gonna have to add that in later because we're having some technical difficulties with Rodney's connection right now. But we're gonna go straight back over to Carl Demeraux with this question. How do you think President Trump has handled the COVID-19 pandemic? Obviously a big week for the intersection of those two particular topics. And how about Governor Scott? How would you like to see something done differently at the national or state level in terms of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic and handling this particular crisis that we found ourselves in as a country? Straight back over to Carl Demeraux.
Well, boy, what a contrast there. I don't think you could have more of a contrast. I mean, President Trump has provided no leadership on this pandemic. What he's done instead is given misinformation, given conflicting information. He's undercut his experts. He's touted scurrilous at best remedies. Governor Scott, on the other hand, I have to take my hat off to him. He has done an excellent job. He has very good people working for him. He listens to them. He knows when he's doesn't have all the information on something, and he goes and gets it. And I think he has worked very hard to keep us all safe. And you know, the infection rates and transmission rates that we have here in Vermont speak to that. We're very lucky to be here. We're lucky that our economy can be open to a degree that it is because our infection rates are so low and because we have good, solid contact tracing programs. I don't think that there could be more contrast here. You've got incompetence versus competence. You've gotten good leadership versus no leadership. You've got listening to science and listening to scientific advisors versus I don't even know what to call that other side. So that's my thoughts on that. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Carl Demeraux. Okay, the next question is, how do you think President Trump has handled the COVID-19 pandemic? And how about Governor Scott? What would you like to see done differently at the national and or state level?
Okay, so I haven't followed the national quite so much. I've been paying more attention to the state level and what the governor has been telling us. And I think that maybe this pandemic was something that no one knew about, kind of hit us in the backside, and nobody really knew what the proper thing was to do to start with. But some will say there was enough scientific information out there, so the president should have done more quicker. I can't really say if it made a difference or not, because we don't have any historic information to guide us on. I think Governor Scott, on the other hand, I think he did. We had a little more time than the West Coast had, and was able to have a little more information presented to him through health on World Health Organization and so on. And I think he made the right calls in protecting the Vermonters.
over to Samantha Lefebvre. Samantha, how do you think President Trump has handled the COVID-19 pandemic, and how about Governor Scott? And is there anything you would like to see done differently at the state or national level?
So I think that Governor Scott has done a great job with our state. As Mr. Demerol has said, I'm grateful that I live in Vermont, and for our medical team and advisors, and that our economy has been able to open back up to where we are at. I am grateful that we have a state constitution to be able to make our own decisions. And you can see how other states have done that also under the leadership of our national leadership. Each state has been able to make their own choices, and I'm thankful that Phil Scott has
Unbelievable.
been able to lead us to where we are. I know that it would have been nice to open up sooner, but you can only play with the cards that you were dealt. And at that time, it wasn't good for us to open up, and we are making the best of what we have now. And I am grateful for the teams that we do have throughout Vermont, for contact tracing, for keeping people updated, our fire and rescue services, our hospital workers. Everyone came together. I do work at the hospital in Burlington. In the beginning, it was very scary. It was good to have leadership throughout, all from management to the hospital leaders, to Phil Scott, just reassuring us that we were going to make it through, and we did, and we're on the other side of it, and not all the way through, but we're building back, and we're going to make it through. We are Vermont strong when it comes to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Samantha. We're going to go over to Kate MacLean. Kate, how do you feel President Trump has handled the COVID-19 pandemic, and how do you feel Governor Scott has handled the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that Trump has been criminally negligent at maybe at best for what he's done to our country and to the 200,000 plus Americans that have lost their lives. I'm really grateful to be living in Vermont, because while I don't agree with Governor Scott on many different issues, I'm indebted to the way that he has led our state, and the way that the legislature and the commissioners and even our, I'm indebted to the way that everyone has led. All Vermonters have taken the response to the coronavirus incredibly seriously. We have all listened to the science, and we have all listened to the medical professionals, and it is because of every single Vermonter that we are one of the success stories here in America. And it's because of that our economy has been able to open. Our leadership took a nonpartisan approach to the coronavirus, which is entirely appropriate. And it is one that it's an approach that you can't say a lot of other states took. So I'm very grateful for the way that played out, that our governing body met the severity of the pandemic where it needed to be met.
All righty. Thank you very much, Kate MacLean. Over to Rama Schneider. Rama, how do you feel that President Trump has handled the COVID-19 pandemic, and how about Governor Scott's handling of the pandemic? Would you like to see anything done differently at the state or national level?
Yeah, I'd like to get a new president at the national level. I agree with Kate. I think the word criminal can be applied to Trump and how he's handled this pandemic. With all we know about the if I went out and told people I had COVID and went around hacking and spitting on them, and in a lot of places I could be charged with a crime, assault of different types. And Trump's been going around encouraging the whole country to go around hack and cough and spit on each other. He's been horrible. He's criminal. And I don't know. The results just show in certain places, in certain circles. On the other hand, Governor Scott, it's not what he has done that has been so good. It's Governor Scott seems to have understood that he needs to turn to the people that know what they're doing and let them do what needs to be done. And that's part of being a good leader. It really is. It's finding the right people and letting the right people do the work. because the governor can't be an expert on everything, and we shouldn't expect him to. So I think Governor Scott's done a really great job with the handling of the COVID environment, pandemic, in the sense that he certainly has turned to the people that know what they're doing and has let them put forward what should be done. So, on Trump, it's obvious how I feel about it. On Governor Scott, that's one area where I think he's done really good. Anything further that needs to be, I'll tell you the truth. I think we still need to stay slow and steady on this whole pandemic thing right now. As much as people want to get out there and get in a rush, I would like to go back to bingo and calling bingo. I had a lot of fun pulling up the numbers and going B5, G52. It was a
10
great time,
seconds.
very social. But we need to be smart. We need to take our time, and we need to get this one right.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Rama Schneider. Up to Susan Hatch Davis. Susan, how do you think the president has handled the COVID-19 pandemic, and how about Governor Scott?
Well, we definitely have seen a difference in leadership style at the national level. We have a president who, though now I guess he has shown that it's not a hoax, but he's said one thing, then said another, and it's hard for American people to really get behind anything that he might say because he hasn't been a consistent voice or a leader. Unlike Governor Scott, who many things I don't agree with many of his policies, but he has shown to have good leadership style. He's brought the right people from his administration in. Dr. Levine is great, and the people in Vermont are listening to him, and so that's the other great thing is that we Vermonters have listened to him and we've done what needs to be done. And so it has made Governor Scott's administration be very successful in the outcomes and the things that he's doing, his methodical approaches to opening and closing and that kind of thing. So he listens to science, something that I don't believe that our president does. So I don't think there's a lot more that anyone could really say. It's just night and day. Thank you.
All righty, thank you very much, Susan Hatch Davis. Our sixth question of this round is: this year, a paid family leave bill was passed, vetoed, and lost in an override attempt by a single vote. So to our candidates here, what is your position on paid family leave? Straight back over to Susan Hatch Davis. Oh, Susan, I think you're still muted.
Yes, I was. Sorry. I forget that I've got to reach up high to unmute. I think that paid family leave is one of the things that we really need in our state. I think that's one thing that's going to help attract young people to the state. I mean, if we have better paying jobs that do attract people, some of the drawbacks to keeping them here, bringing them here, is paid family leave and quality childcare, as well as our schools. The one thing that I think it's tough for, and maybe we need to look at, is can people who are working at the wages that they're making, can they afford to pay for paid family leave insurance and that kind of thing? So I think it needs to have some work, and I hope that when I return to Montpelier, I can work on that, because I think it is something that we really need to move our economy forward and to bring young people into our state. Thank you.
All righty, thank you very much, Susan Hatch Davis. This year, a paid family leave bill was passed, vetoed, and lost in an override attempt by a single vote. What is your position on paid family leave?
I voted against it. I think the concept is good, but the way the bill was written, I thought it was very poorly written for a couple reasons. One is that anyone that was receiving a paycheck had to pay into this program, even though they knew they'd have no chance in hell of ever participating in it. The way it was written, you know, if a younger person took family leave because they were growing, starting a family, if you work for a small business, and they had to replace you, guarantee you your job back. And if you were a large employer, they had to guarantee you a job, but not necessarily the job you had when you left. So I felt that it was setting young people up for failure. I mean, if they thought they're doing the right thing with spending time in the new family and then come back and find out they didn't have a job or didn't have the job they thought they had, would just put them in a financial problem. That's one of the main reasons I didn't volunteer for it. I didn't support it.
Alrighty. Well, thank you very much for that answer. Over to Carl Demeraux. Same question. What is your position on paid family leave?
I was an original sponsor of H107, and I missed the debate and the vote on that bill because of a family death in the family. But I listened to the debate as I was on my way to the wake and the funeral, and I voted to override the governor's veto of the bill, and that was a very bitter bill to lose by just one vote. I think that this will be back again. This is an important bill, and it's an important program. If as Susan said, if we're going to attract young families to this state, there are a lot of other states that have this, and we need it. And it's not just young families. Like if you've got an older parent who's not doing well, they need some care. You can't afford to put them into the hospital. You could use your paid family and medical leave to take care of them for 4 or 6 weeks. And it might be something that this is a program that will keep families from potentially becoming bankrupt due to healthcare costs. So I'm all for it, and I think we need to pass a paid family and medical leave into law in Vermont.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Carl Demeraux. We're going to toss this one over to Samantha Lefebvre. Samantha, what is your position on paid family leave? Samantha, what's your position on paid family leave?
So I do support paid family leave, but I think that we need to take illnesses. This could be detrimental to. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I am a supporter of paid family leave. As Mr. Demeraux said, it's not only for younger, it's for anyone in your family. If your parents, your spouse, it gives you the availability to be there to support somebody. But we need to take a look at what it does to our small businesses. It could be detrimental to one, let alone being able to pay for one employee. You'll then have to pay for that employee to be out and have another employee. So while it is attractive for an employee to come into a company where they do offer paid family leave, there are some things that might offset it that a small company can offer you that a large company cannot. I do encourage all companies that can afford it to offer it to their employees. But I would hope that when the upcoming legislative session occurs, that we can look at it to see how we can make it work for all businesses to be able to accommodate to it, but not force it upon all businesses, because it would be a shame to lose more businesses in the state of Vermont. But I do think that it is a good idea to have, so that way people can be able to support their loved ones. But we just have to find the right mix between what businesses can afford and also what an employee can afford to be able to pay this out of their paycheck. It would reflect their take-home pay also. But I do hope we can work to a way where every employee will be able to have this as an option for them. Thank you.
All righty, thank you very much, Samantha. Samantha, over to Kate MacLean. Kate MacLean, what is your position on paid family leave?
So I fully support paid family leave. I see it as both an issue of social conscience and an economic one. And what I mean by social conscience is that, it's the humane thing to do to allow people the economic security to take time off to take care of a newborn or to take care of an ailing relative. But as an economic one, it's an imperative for our state to catch up with the other states in America that provide this, 4 of which are right here in the Northeast. I see so many. I know we all do. It's the talk of the town. So many New Yorkers and Bostonians leaving their cities and fleeing to our rural towns. And we need to be a competitive state where the quality of living matches or ideally exceeds those of other states. So I think it's time for us to catch up there and to lead the rest of the country.
All righty, thank you very much, Kate MacLean. Over to Rama Schneider. Rama, what is your position on paid family leave?
So I have some ambivalence and mixed feelings on this, but I do support the concept of the paid family leave. And I also want to throw the child care into this mix too. I think they are both important they're both equally important. If we're going to have the child care we're going to have the paid family leave, we certainly need to do it on a broad-based tax, and we can't be expecting employers just to pick it up. If we feel that this is a social good, we need to pay for it as if it's a social good and not a specific business good. That said, I would support paid family leave and more payments for child care if there was also a movement at the same time to try to push back down to family units some of these responsibilities. Unfortunately, we've allowed an economy to develop which has required both parents are multiple adults out of the same household to go out and work. I think it has set us up for trying to fill in with a lot of other expenses, which, the paid family leave, the child care, all these add on to expenses. We're asking other people to do work that at one time we could have done ourselves. And of course, it costs more money. The reality being what the reality is at this point with the economy, yes, I think at this very moment in time, we need the paid family leave. We need the minimum wage to be about $15 or better. And we need to have single payer health care, and we need to have the child care available. But we need to try to work ourselves out of that, and we need to try to do it seriously by changing some of the economic expectations and the
10
social
seconds.
context. The way we have our families at home. Otherwise, this just spirals up and just keeps getting more expensive till people just dump it out of frustration.
All righty, thank you very much, Rama Schneider. And now we're going to be moving on to our lightning round. Your candidates will have 10 seconds or less to respond to each of the following questions. So we're going to throw all the candidates up on the screen here so we can all see each other and go through these questions fairly quickly. Starting off with Rama once again, have you been doing in-person campaigning events during the COVID-19 pandemic?
No.
Susan Hatch Davis, same question. Oh, we can't hear you, Susan.
No, the only thing I've done is deliver signs.
Okay, thank you very much. Carl Demeraux, have you been doing in-person campaigning events?
No, just lots and lots and lots of phone calls.
And Samantha, how about you? Didn't quite
Yes,
catch
I've
that
been
one.
doing a healthy mix just as Carl. Yes, I've been doing a healthy mix just as Kate, Carl, and Rama did. We were outside at an event just this weekend. So I'm doing an event between handing out signs, dropping off mailers, and communicating over social media.
All righty, thank you very much. And Kate MacLean, have you been doing any in-person campaigning events?
I've been doing a pretty healthy combo. Mostly phone calls, and then we've been finding safe, masked, socially distant ways to meet voters in person.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. Next lightning round question. Given the choice, which House committee would you serve on? First up is Kate.
Ag Committee.
Ag Committee, interesting. Rama Schneider.
In this order, Speaker of the House, Appropriations, Ways and Means, and Education.
Speaker's not quite a committee. Susan Hatch Davis, what committee would you serve on?
Military Affairs.
Interesting. And Carl Demeraux, what committee would you like to serve on?
I'd like to go back to Corrections and Institutions.
Interesting. And Samantha Lefebvre, what committee would you like to serve on in the House?
I would prefer Ways and Means, but I'm happy with going anywhere that they see fit.
All righty, thank you very much. And Samantha, you're up first for this next question. Do you plan on voting by mail or in person?
I'm going to happily and safely vote in person.
All righty, thank you very much. Kate MacLean, mail or in person?
I'll be voting by mail.
Thank you very much. Rama Schneider, we vote by mail or in person?
I'll be voting by mail, and I got a couple seconds here, so I want to thank you for making the accommodations for Rodney.
We're working on it. All righty, and let's see here. Susan Hatch Davis, by mail or in person?
Mail.
All righty, and Carl
Unless something
Demeraux.
goes wrong.
What was that again, Susan?
Unless something goes wrong, I just got my ballot today.
Gotcha. All right, and Carl Demeraux, how will you be voting?
Mail.
By mail. All righty. Next lightning round question. First, we'll be going to Samantha this time. Do you have the technological capabilities to participate in a virtual legislative session if the legislature continues with remote sessions next year?
Yeah, we're doing it right now. I feel pretty confident with my technical capabilities, but if we're going to be making kids go back to school, then us as adults need to be proving them as an example that we can function back together again. So if kids can go, we can go.
All righty. Thank you very much, Samantha. Kate MacLean, do you have the technological capabilities to participate in virtual legislative sessions?
I do, but many Vermonters don't, and that concerns me when it comes to the accessibility of the legislature.
Okay, thank you very much. Rama Schneider, same question.
Yeah, I do. Absolutely.
All righty, thank you very much. Susan Hatch Davis, same question. Technological capability to participate in a virtual legislative session?
Yes, I do.
Clear enough for me. And Carl, up there in the corner on my screen, Carl Demeraux, do you have the technological capabilities to participate in a virtual legislative session?
Yes, I do, but like someone else said, I can't remember who it was, that not all Vermonters have that. We've been, the legislature met in virtually since March, but a lot of legislators don't have the bandwidth to really give it their full effort.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for flying through that lightning round. I appreciate it, and we're going to keep the pace moving here. So we're going to go to the lightning round. So these are kind of rapid fire questions, 10 seconds or less for your responses. So the first question is pretty simple. Have you been doing any in-person campaigning events during the COVID-19 pandemic?
I personally have not. I've done very, very little in person. I've worked with Samantha and Bill Huff's running for Senate. We've done some sign waves together, and we just recently had last Saturday a fall festival here in the town of Williamstown, which was an outdoor event. We participated in that with masks and social distancing. So with being in the state house as long as we were, I'm an active farmer. I just have not had time, even if I wanted to, have time to go out and knock on people's doors. I mean, if people come up to me and they have, and go to a store or they're driving by or whatever, they stop and want to talk, I'll talk. And I'll just try to keep my safe distance. But
Okay. Alrighty. So the next rapid fire question, 10 seconds or less for your response. Given the choice, which House committee would you serve on?
I'd like to stay on the Ag Committee. I'm vice chair right now, so I'd like to remain there. But if I was to get moved, I probably would be interested in going to government ops.
Alrighty. Okay. Next rapid fire question. Do you plan to vote by mail or in person?
I plan to vote in person.
Okay.
Wear my mask and keep my distance, and I'll vote in person.
Alrighty. And last rapid fire question. Do you have the technological capabilities to participate in a virtual legislative session if the legislature continues with remote sessions next year?
Well, as I said, I had no problem whatsoever on the Zoom meeting site. We started meeting here last year in the end of March, and then we started again here in September. Had no problem at all. But as you can see, I'm not doing well on this one.
I don't think that one's necessarily on you. We have a If you're just joining us, we are broadcasting live from the offices of the White River Valley Herald and beyond for our not our Orange Washington Addison district. That was the last one. This is the Orange-1 House District debate. My name is Dylan Kelley, and I am joined by candidates Such and Hatch Davis, Carl Demeraux, Rodney Graham will be joining us later, Samantha Lefebvre, Kate MacLean, and Rama Schneider. And so now for our final round, like the first round, each of your candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to the following questions. As the first question we have, as a representative, what solutions do you support in addressing the systemic racism that exists within law enforcement and other agencies? And what specific steps will you take to address inequalities facing Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color in our state? First up is Carl Demeraux. Go ahead, Carl.
I think that the legislature made some tremendous strides in this past session, and we passed a number of bills around this on policing, and I think that and also S338, which had some which is going to take a much deeper look at why we lock up or imprison more people of color in the state than are represented in our population. But I think that moving forward, this is something that the legislature is going to have to work on every session, and we're not just going to solve this overnight with a couple of bills. It's going to be hard work every session, and it's going to take people to listen in maybe a way that we're not used to listening, and maybe be willing to be pretty uncomfortable with what we hear or even what we see in ourselves. It's different work from what most of us are normally used to doing. And so I will pledge that I'm willing to look at myself and things in me that I might not have been willing to face before. But I'm willing to do that as part of this work, because it's really important that we make everyone in this state feel comfortable, because we need them all to pitch in and contribute to making Vermont a better place.
Okay, thank you very much, Carl Demeraux. As a representative, what solutions do you support in addressing the systemic racism that exists within law enforcement and other agencies? And what specific steps will you take to address inequalities facing Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color in our state?
Well, I would look at any legislation that came up, and at that, review it and decide if I'd support it or not. I'm a firm believer in lead as you want people to be. I mean, I know a lot of people of different religions, different races, different genders, or whatever it is, and uh, I don't treat them any different, and they don't treat me any different. And I only judge people on their act are disrespectful. Then I'm not. Did put some money in his budget for a racial equity commission or panel or whatever it was, and he put some money forth in the budget to start down that road of doing some studies, and I support that fully.
Over to Samantha Lefebvre. As representatives, what solutions do you support in addressing the systemic racism that exists within law enforcement and other agencies? And what specific steps will you take to address inequalities facing Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color in our state?
So I'm saddened that this is even a question for a candidate in 2020. I feel that no matter what legislation we pass, it comes back down to people in Vermont and across our country. We need to be a lot more accountable with our actions within ourselves. It just comes down to that. I was raised that, you treat other people how you want to be treated. And I think if every individual treated their friends, neighbors, strangers that way, then this world would be a lot better of a place. Thankfully, we live in Vermont where maybe this isn't as such of a, maybe people don't always see it. That doesn't mean it's not here, and we can do a better job. But again, it's holding ourselves accountable. The government's not going to help us. The government's not going to save us. It's going to come down to each one of us doing our job. And when we are mentioning police, there's good and there's bad, just like there is with everything. There's good and there's bad farmers. There's good and there's bad teachers. There are good and bad bakers out there. So it comes down to giving our police officers the training that they need, the support that they need. They are facing more than just criminal activity. They're becoming, counselors and helping people in some of their most saddest and hardest times. As an EMT and a firefighter, I saw people at their weakest and hardest and worst moments of their life. And sometimes if it wasn't for the officers that were there, it would have been a different situation. So again, I'm saddened that this is even a question about what is our government going to do to help other people feel involved. Like that's on us. We need to be doing better and being a better neighbor and being a better friend. And I will make sure that I hold myself accountable for that. And if I see anything outside of the lines of, I will hold other people accountable for that too. Not only when I am in Montpelier, but when I am an everyday citizen in Vermont. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Samantha Lefebvre. Over to Kate MacLean. Kate MacLean, what steps will you take to address inequalities facing Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color in our state?
So the way I see it is that I think that prior to 2020, this discussion was not nearly a focus of Vermonters. And there was this assumption or even dismissal that racism was not an issue here in Vermont. And I think that many people felt that way because when you look in a room, like the virtual room we're in right now, it's a pretty homogenous setting. And we are coming to terms with the fact that, of course, racism is a huge problem, not just in our country, but also here in Vermont. The ACLU in Vermont recently reported that Black and Latinx drivers are nearly 4 times as likely to be pulled over than their fellow white Vermonters. So the issue is emphatically here, and we need to address it. I support things like the bill, the use of force standard, to direct police to not employ deadly force when not necessary. I'm sure we're all familiar with that horrible case up in Burlington of Mr. Grennan, who was shot dead in his own bathtub where he was hiding. So as a legislator, I would hope to work closely with the Racial Equity Advisory Panel with Susanna Davis. I believe that racism is an intersectional issue, that we need to, through which we need to view every piece of legislation so that we can examine some deep biases that exist in this state.
Okay, thank you very much, Kate MacLean. Over to Rama Schneider, same question. What will you do to address inequalities faced by Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color in our state?
I think the first thing that we have to do, and let me join the rest of them, is offer what I think are actually, for the most part, platitudes at this moment, and they're well intentioned, and I don't think anybody's trying to duck the subject. I think we have a problem understanding what needs to be done. We have millions and millions of our fellow Americans telling us that, based solely on the color of their skin, our public and private institutions are treating them as second and third class human beings, not just second and third class citizens, but they're treating them as something less as human beings. I'm going to take millions and millions of my fellow Americans at their word when they keep saying this and they keep repeating it over and over. I'm 63 years old. This racial discussion is the exact same thing, the exact same words, all the exact same actions as were occurring back when I was a little tyke in the 60s, back in Chicago, Illinois. So, quite frankly, I'm at the point where I'm just so sick and tired of the racism. I don't intend to put up with it under any form at all. As a state government, it is up to us, because we're a huge employer through our state government, to make sure that our operations do not discriminate against people, and that the people who are working within the government operate with decency in mind and without racism. And the biggest thing is, we need to sit down and just listen to the millions and millions of our fellow Americans and what they're telling us. And we need to take their solutions to heart and move forward with the solutions they offer. Because as I hear, this is my personal interpretation, what I hear in this room,
10 seconds.
we don't really know how to deal with it, but there are people who are getting the brunt of the damage done to them, and they know what needs to be done, and that's who we should be, just like Governor Scott with the COVID crisis. Let's carry on with that attitude.
Okay, thank you very much, Rama Schneider. Up to Susan Hatch Davis. Susan, what will you do to address inequalities facing Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color in our state?
Well, I believe more equality and diversity are needed. And one thing, it promotes opportunity, growth, social well-being for citizens in our state. And I know from personal experience that I had a relative visiting from out of state who came here. He's a gay man, and he had a person of color riding in his car, and he was going to take him to Burlington to show him how and what was available in Burlington and to see our beautiful state. And they were going up the interstate and they were pulled over. And for no real reason. They weren't speeding, nothing. And they were pulled over. And he thought it was because that he had a Black man traveling with him. And he was from out of state. So I think that deeply rooted racism and white privilege need to be abolished wherever it exists. And as a representative, I believe strongly that I have an important role in helping to open people's emotions, minds, and their empathy toward a diversity of culture, race, gender, abilities, and much more. And I will support policies in our state that will support my beliefs. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Susan Hatch Davis. And we're going to stay right here with Susan. In September, the legislature overrode the governor's veto on the Global Warming Solutions Act, which, among other things, requires a 26% reduction in carbon emissions below 2005 levels by 2025. Do you think this is realistic? And if so, how would you propose to achieve that? If not, do you think the legislature should move to repeal the Global Warming Solutions Act? straight back over to Susan Hatch Davis.
I believe that we need to be real vigilant about addressing climate change. And in a previous question, I talked about some of the reasons why I believe that, because we see it, it's affecting us. Everyone that's outside, inside, today are seeing that. So I think that we need to be vigilant about it, but I also understand that there may be limited progress. And I believe I put this also in your earlier questions that were going to be in the paper, that in addressing climate change without simultaneous progress in the area of social and economic justice. I know that many families that are working, both people working who may be living in older homes, they are, one broken down refrigerator away from maybe not paying their mortgage or not being able to pay for their groceries, where they might otherwise be okay. They can't really afford to maybe insulate this older home that they have or something like that. So I think that we need to take a look at maybe some of the income levels and see if we can expand those more. And I know that in Efficiency Vermont and those places, those income levels have already been expanded, but I think we need to more. And I think that if we are wanting people to drive electric cars, I don't see how people are going to drive an electric car,
10
even if
seconds.
they at $3,000 rebate. I don't see how they're going to be able to afford to get a loan to buy one. So I think that we need to look at it. Take a holistic approach to it as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Susan Hatch Davis. We're going to toss this one now to Carl Demeraux. Carl, do you think the goals of the Global Warming Solutions Act are realistic? And if so, how would you propose to achieve them? If not, do you think the legislature should move to repeal the Global Warming Solutions Act?
I think we need to move ahead and have a plan, and that's what the Global Warming Solutions Act was about, having a plan. The legislature set these targets back 15 years ago, and it's getting a little late now. But there's no way we're going to meet the targets if we don't have a plan. Right now, the state has got a very scattershot approach to meeting those targets. We've got some money for electric vehicle charging stations. We've got some incentives for people to buy electric vehicles. We've got some programs that deal with weatherization for thermal heat, but we don't really have a plan. And I think some of these earlier targets may be very difficult to reach, but we're going to gain steam on this and get ahead of it. But we're not going to do that without having some sort of comprehensive plan that the state can say, all right, these are the targets and this is how we're going to get there. Right now, we don't have that. The Global Warming Solutions Act will create that, and I think that's our best shot at meeting those goals. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Carl Demeraux. Over to Samantha Lefebvre. Samantha, do you think the goals of the Global Warming Solutions Act are realistic? And if not, how do you think the legislature should move to repeal the Global Warming Solutions Act? What's your take on that?
So I, as I said before, I'm not a supporter of the Global Warming Solutions Act. There are no solutions currently. I do feel that we do need to take a look at our environment and what we are doing. And as I proposed before, that we should take a look at some of the money that we are spending and put it towards our wastewater treatments instead of, Burlington and Rutland dumping their sewage into Burlington, into the lake. We could, put some of our money directly in Vermont and see a change. Vermont is a state. Vermont is not the globe. Vermont needs to stop having to follow. And I know that a lot of the community members I've talked to are very discouraged and very upset about the Global Warming Solutions Act being passed. Vermonters should not be punished to have to pay penalties, fees, and fines if they do not have the economic means to make these big changes. So yes, rebates are great, incentives are great, but the state can also be looking at different ways that we even work with stuff, at our state buildings. I know that when Vermont Yankee left, it took a lot of jobs and it took a lot of our energy that we made. And so another thing that I am a supporter of is our biomass. I am a strong supporter of our forestry and industry. And we can start by, again, bringing more jobs back in and creating different fuel that way. But again, the Global Warming Solutions Act is something that I would work to repeal. If it's not going to work for rural Vermont, and anyone that has voted on it and for it needs to really take a look at what they are doing to their community members. Because right now it's just a shot in the dark, and it's not going to have a good outcome.
All right. Thank you very much, Samantha Lefebvre. All righty. And the next question is, in September, the legislature overrode the governor's veto on the Global Warming Solutions Act, which, among other things, requires a 26% reduction in carbon emissions below 2005 levels by 2025. Do you think this is realistic? And if so, how would you propose to achieve that? If not, do you think the legislature should move to repeal the Global Warming Solutions Act?
So I don't support that bill as written. I fully support climate change initiatives. We, as a small state, and we have a lot of forest land, we have a lot of prime ag land. They sequester carbon emissions. And I think that we're probably sequestering more than we're producing in the state. But turning over our authority, legislative authority, to a 23-member board for them to put the plan together, and they're not goals, they're mandates. If you read the bill, it says mandates, it doesn't say goals. So this panel don't have to come back to us. They don't have to get our approval or disapproval. The governor has no say in it. And so they can put out whatever they want to tell us we have to do. And if we can't do it, then it opens up the state for lawsuits from everybody. I do not think that kind of a reduction that quick can be achieved. I mean, I know people there's a Senate program for AV vehicles and heat pumps for heating, solar and wind and all that. But again, I mean, we're a rural state, and we have hills and valleys and hilltops and dirt roads and I just don't think there's enough technology out there to keep our roads clean, to really be efficient with electric cars out in the rural areas.
10 seconds.
Yeah, and I think there's a better way to do it, and I think the whole legislature, if they work together, we could come up with a plan and enact it and follow through with it, and not turn our legislative authority over to a small group of people.
Gotcha. Over to Kate MacLean. Kate MacLean, do you feel that the goals of the Global Warming Solutions Act are realistic? And if so, how would you propose to achieve them? If not, do you think the legislature should move to repeal the act?
I would say that I don't know that it's a question of realistic or not. I don't know that we have another option other than to move in this very aggressive direction. I worry very much about, from my position, not just as a member of rural Vermont, but as a select woman here in rural Vermont, I worry about the realities of our daily life and how we will be able to help meet those goals. looking at my town budget, it's very dependent on fossil fuels. And so we will need the legislature and this committee that's formed to really take into careful consideration those rural realities. I know in Corinth, I believe they just finished the firehouse over there, and they've got it all heated electric and are looking to put in solar panels. And it's those kinds of innovative ways moving forward that I hope we can work as towns to share those ideas, and I hope that the Global Warming Solutions Act takes into very careful consideration those realities here in Orange-1.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Kate MacLean. Over to Rama Schneider. Rama, what do you feel about the Global Warming Solutions Act goals? Do you think those goals are realistic and achievable? And if not, do you propose that the legislature move to repeal the Global Warming Solutions Act?
Well, first of all, no, we should not repeal the the Global Warming Solutions Act. And I agree with Kate. It's not a matter of do I think they're achievable? That's an imperative. Our physical environment is our only source of food, water, air, and shelter. We have no other source to go to for the food we eat, the air we breathe, the water we drink, and all the materials we use to construct the homes we live in and that we build our businesses within. So it's imperative that we take care of our physical environment, not just for us in the next 5 or 10 or 15 years, but for our kids, for our grandkids, for their kids. I don't want to go to my deathbed believing that I didn't do everything I could to pass on a healthy and a sustainable future to the kids, period. Um, there are ways to do this, and it's not going to be done just by the state legislature. There's no way, but there's a huge part for the state legislature to play. Part of it, though, is local. I mean, as again, I'll go back to what Kate, simply because she was talking before me, and it's very fresh in my mind what she was saying. But she's talking about the need for localities to do some work on this on their own without the state telling them what to do, how to do. And a lot of them actually have over the recent years. I know we started to move that way with the school district in Williamstown when I was on the school board, even just by putting up a solar panel field out by the school to help pay for our electric bill. That's not enough nowadays. You need to go well beyond that at this point. We also need to think about how we interact out between towns. How do we
10
spend our
seconds,
money?
Rama.
Do we spend a bunch of money so people can drive all over the place, or do we spend our money so people can stay within their local communities?
Alrighty, thank you very much. And we're gonna stay right here with Rama for question number 9. How would you propose the legislature help create more affordable housing in your district? And do you think that's a worthwhile goal? Rama Schneider.
Yes, it's a worthwhile goal. How you go about it, that again, that's not something the legislature is going to be able to come out with an answer without a lot of public support. And the public support's going to have to be towards helping to build homes that are smaller, take up less resources, have less demand on utilities, et cetera, that become less expensive for people to live in. So, but it's not something, I'll tell you, you're not going to be able to legislate that. That is going to have to come, I think a tiny home, but bigger maybe, these are movements that have to come from the population and to make the legislature act on them. I know I will go down there as a voice to encourage this sort of activity, but I don't know. There's not a whole lot the legislature can do about mandating affordable housing.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Rama Schneider. Susan Hatch Davis, do you want to take a swing at this one? How do you propose the legislature help create more affordable housing in your district? And do you think that's a worthwhile goal?
Well, I think it's going to have to be through policy and funding if it's going to happen in our district. But I do know that there is a need for affordable housing and housing in general, because We see people in our district that they're living together as families in one home, maybe 2 or 3 families living together because A, they probably can't find a place because we have a shortage of housing. Uh, B, they probably can't afford to be on their own, so they are living together. We've seen our local campground who has rented out their they're not mobile homes, they're campers. They've rented those out to families who are homeless. I know that in our local church, we have, since 1982, I think it was last year and possibly even the year before, but last year for sure, that we saw people living in our church, people that didn't talk to us directly, but who were there. Um, so homelessness is a problem, and we need affordable housing for, well, we need housing in general. If we are trying to attract people to come to Vermont to work and live, then we need to have a place for them to live. So we need housing in general. So I think it's going to have to be a combination of policies and funding, and you know, uh, people are going to have to put their heads together, I guess, to try to come up with solutions and work with um, local town governments.
Alrighty, thank you very
Thank you.
much, Susan Hatch Davis. We're going to swing this one over to Carl Demeraux. Carl, what do you propose the legislature do to help create more affordable housing in your district, and do you think that is a worthwhile goal? Carl Demeraux.
It absolutely is a worthwhile goal, and it's absolutely something that Vermont needs. Now, as for here in the district, I think that's a harder question to answer. Perhaps in some of our village centers, there may be room for more housing in those areas. But statewide, we really do have a problem here. And one of the things that I would like to see done to fix it is to fully fund the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. Right now, we're relying on housing bonds, which the state can't really afford to do any more bonding than it's doing now. We're already bonding above what the state treasurer has suggested. If we fully funded VHCB through the property transfer tax, we wouldn't need to issue bonds to do this work. We could just fund it through VHCB. And we've got a lot of old housing stock in this state too that needs to be updated. And I think that's another thing that we ought to be looking at. We could work with our tech centers to do some of this work. It's sort of a little bit like Habitat for Humanity type stuff. But we could train people to do this work through our tech centers and get it done, and then have housing at the end that's affordable and available for folks to use. So I think we absolutely need to do this work, but in the district, we probably need to be looking at more village centers and more thickly settled parts of the district, which there aren't a lot of, more than anything else. Thanks.
Gotcha. Okay, next question is, how would you propose the legislature help create more affordable housing in your district? And do you think that's a worthwhile goal?
Yeah, I think housing is affordable housing is hard to find in most of our state. Maybe not up north so much, but in our state, and I know the Housing and Conservation Board has been doing a lot. They were doing a lot of conservation land easements in this last biennium. We did instruct them to try and move a little more money for affordable housing projects. And, one of the things we were hoping for with Act 250 reform was to get a little eased up on some restrictions that would make it more affordable to build houses. Well, if we could streamline the permit process and make it easier and shorter and less expensive to get the proper permits to do this. And I think that's where we need to focus.
Over to Samantha Lefebvre. Samantha, What do you propose to help the legislature create more affordable housing in your district? And do you think that's a worthwhile goal? Samantha Lefebvre.
Yes, as a landlord, I think it is a great goal to look at. So some of the stuff that has been proposed by our current legislation is going against affordable housing. So Global Warming Solutions Act, we're going to right there hike up the price of our heating sources, and then property taxes. They're going to they're going to be going up when you start talking about some of the things that were just mentioned. I do feel that in our district there could even be availability for looking out, as what Mr. Demrow said, reaching out to our tech centers. I went to Essex Tech, and that was one of the things that the building trades worked on was housing. That was one of their projects they did. They went and they built a house. So there are ways that we can come together and make it so that way there is more affordable housing. But you first got to look at what you are calling affordable and who you're trying to make it affordable for. Because as a landlord right now, because of the pandemic, I am being put in a situation, and so aren't some of my tenants, that now we're going to have to pay even more for what we currently have. And some people can't even make ends meet with what we're at. So I do support looking at housing, and I do support trying to come together to see where that would work better. It might not be directly, in Orange or Corinth or Vershire, but Williamstown is a bigger area. And so that is where I'm at. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Samantha Lefebvre. Over to Kate MacLean. What do you think the legislature can do to help create more affordable housing in the district? And do you think that's a worthwhile goal?
Oh, I absolutely think it's a worthwhile goal. Houselessness is a hidden issue in our district, but it certainly exists. And then there are many voters that I talk to by phone in this campaign who have told me that the cost of living in our district has become untenable, and they're worried about not being able to afford their home. I really like Carl's suggestion of moving or of building new affordable housing in town centers. I think that it's very important that when considering any new projects, and especially building, that we're taking that on in a thoughtful and ecologically minded way. And to echo both Carl and Jay Hooper from a previous debate, the idea of renovating and retrofitting and weatherizing our old abandoned or empty homes seems like a beautiful solution to a very urgent need.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Kate MacLean. That does it for that question. On to the next one. This one's a bit of a mouthful. Last month, the legislature passed S54, a bill that would establish a tax and regulate market for cannabis. The bill received pushback from coalitions of farmers and social justice activists because they're concerned it doesn't adequately support small farmers or address the disproportionate number of Black, Indigenous, and people of color who have been imprisoned for illegal cannabis use and possession. Do you support this bill? If not, would you consider any bill that legalizes cannabis sales? And we're going to go straight back to Kate MacLean for this one.
Yeah, so I talked about this a little bit with the legislation that I disagreed with way back in the beginning of the debate, but I do not support this bill. I don't support it because of the coalition of farmers and racial justice advocates who say that this is not going far enough. And it's not going far enough at all. There's specifically, well, we can talk about both farming and racial inequity, but I want to focus on the racial inequity. Cannabis incarceration is so inextricably tied to the BIPOC community because they have been so disproportionately penalized and affected by this. And the fact that this tax and regulate bill does not adequately address the needed reparations means that it does not have my support.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Kate MacLean. We're going to toss this one over to Rama Schneider now. Rama, what do you believe? Do you support S54? The bill would establish a tax and regulate market for cannabis. And what can be done to address the disproportionate number of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color who have been imprisoned for illegal cannabis use and possession? So do you support this bill? And if not, would you consider any bill that legalizes cannabis sales?
So I don't know enough about the bill itself to say if I support it or I don't support it. I do know this much. I am not a great fan of taxing cannabis sales simply because that creates another police force to go out and intrude upon people's daily activities. Having said that, I'm also aware of an awful lot of people that would prefer a regulated market. So if I was in the legislature and it came up to vote, I mean, yeah, I'd be very interested in reading a bill and seeing what's in it. The cannabis prohibition, and this is medicinal and personal use of marijuana as well as industrial hemp to be grown out on the farms, is something I've actually been involved in pushing for ending the cannabis prohibition since the late 90s, really, is when I first started becoming active in that. And as I ran in 2000 as a member of the Vermont Grassroots Party, and that was a major part of our platform, was to deal with the cannabis prohibition because of the bit about, people were having trouble getting medicine. You couldn't grow industrial hemp. It's a plant that helped make us safe from fascism in World War II. And this was all done just to keep people from smoking a little bit of pot in their own private lives. So the only thing that ended up being done was people were smoking pot in their private lives, and nobody was growing hemp, and it was really, really difficult to get some medicine. So personally, I am not in favor of the taxation. I'm not in favor of increasing a police state to deal with this. On the other hand, I'm not entirely against it. Now, on the racial inequities part, I confess that I would need to really sit down and be educated. I believe it. It's not that I
10
don't
seconds.
believe it. I don't know enough about it to answer that at all sensibly.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Rama Schneider. Over to Susan Hatch Davis. Do you support S54? And if not, would you consider any bill that legalizes cannabis sales? Susan Hatch Davis.
Yes, I do support it. And tax and regulation is a bill that I actually submitted when I was a legislator before. And so I am interested for sure. But I do think that it can be improved upon. I mean, incrementalism in politics can be a tough thing on especially working people, poor people, people of color. So this could be interpreted in that way, but I think that it needs to pass, and then I think that one of the reasons I want to be back in Montpelier is to work on this piece of legislation, and I think that we could look at things with the taxation for something like a universal basic income, that kind of thing. So that's it. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you very much. We're going to go over to Carl Demerow now. Same question. Do you support S54? And if not, would you consider any bill that legalizes cannabis sales?
I did support S54. I voted for it. I think that if we are going to have something legal in this state, that there needs to be a mechanism for commerce for it. And without tax and regulate, that's just simply not possible. The one thing I do want to point out about this bill is that it came along with it was also passed a pretty comprehensive expungement bill for people with low-level marijuana convictions, and I think that really needed to happen with this bill, and I'm glad that it did. The one thing that I sort of disagree with the farmers on is that we're not really talking about what we normally think of as an agricultural product here in Vermont. Cannabis is a powerful psychoactive drug, and there are problems that are associated with the growing and storing and processing of it that are not, associated with things like corn or lettuce or squash. And so I think that I thought the bill was a good compromise, and I know that there are folks who aren't happy with it. But I think that for what we're talking about here, it was a good step forward, and it's the beginning of a conversation that can continue in the next legislature. Thanks.
Alrighty, thank you, Carl Demeraux. Last month, the legislature passed S54, a bill that would establish a tax and regulate market for cannabis. The bill received some pushback from coalitions of farmers and social justice activists because they're concerned it doesn't adequately support small farmers or address a disproportionate number of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color who have been imprisoned for illegal cannabis use and possession. Do you support this bill? And if not, would you consider any bill that legalizes cannabis sales?
I did not support this bill, and I would not support any bill that legalizes cannabis use. And one of the big problems with this particular S54 was it included unrestricted advertisement. You could, so these companies could advertise, which as well as I do, they target children just like they did with cigarettes. And, there was a lot said about President Trump not following science. There's all kinds of science out there that, marijuana slows down the development of your brain at a young age, like up to age 26. So, if you use science as your backdrop, I don't think that anyone should be legalizing any kind of drugs.
Okay.
I mean, I'm okay with medical marijuana. That's a different story. But recreational marijuana, I won't approve of it.
So I'm going to restate the question in case anyone might have forgotten because it's a long one. Last month, the legislature passed S54, a bill that would establish a tax and regulate market for cannabis. The bill has received pushback from coalitions of farmers and social justice activists because they're concerned it doesn't adequately support small farmers or address the disproportionate number of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color who have been imprisoned for illegal cannabis use and possession. So now, Samantha Lefebvre, do you support this bill? If not, would you consider any bill that supports and legalizes cannabis sales? Samantha.
So I do, from my understanding, until October of 2022 for the stores to start opening up. So we have some time to be talking about this. I do want to say the one part that I am a supporter of is the expungement. I think anytime that someone can get a clean record for something that now isn't a problem, as long as it was nonviolent. They have a little bit of marijuana, it's now legal. Go ahead and gives them a nice record to start off into the workforce or any other field they're trying to get into. But marijuana is already legal, and so there should be some sort of restrictions or ways that the state can benefit from that. But then once you start getting into taxation and regulation, to me, it's no different than gambling and alcohol, where you start having people addicted into this product. So there are medicinal uses for it, but it's really dangerous when you start having it be something that is promoted to our teenagers. It's something that could be dangerous for them. So it's a kind of double-edged sword. It's something that I would take a closer look at, but for right now, I do not support how it is. Again, besides this part of expungement. So if that could happen by itself, that'd be great. I'm all for people that have non-violent offenses to be able to get a clean record if it came to something that's already illegal. And then when it comes to the farmers, from my understanding, they were going to allow 5 stores to open up. And so that, for the amount of the state of Vermont, that really to start monopolizing what's going on, that would have to be quite a bit. So maybe we'd be able to talk to people that are growing hemp are
10 seconds.
again, marijuana and hemp. There's something missing in the hemp that isn't the same as marijuana. So the hemp farmers can continue on with what they are doing. But again, how the bill is right now, I am not in favor of all of it. So hopefully there is more time to look at it and to see what we can do to make it a little bit more better and safer for Vermont. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And this is the last big question of the night to all of our candidates. What is something that hasn't been mentioned tonight that you would like to support or address through legislation? And how would you build meaningful coalitions to do so? We're going to go straight back to Samantha Lefebvre. What is something that hasn't been mentioned tonight that you would like to address through legislation? And how would you build meaningful coalitions to do so? Samantha Lefebvre.
I'm really concerned about our economy, and that's what this all revolves around. And that is one of the very strong reasons why I am running. We need to have it back and more business friendly. And the coalition that I would ask is that I couldn't see how even people from both sides of the aisle would want to come together to make that happen. Business and seeing what they would need. We've listed off tonight many things that we can work on, but it comes back down to making Vermont affordable so people can stay here, not offering people. It's about making the trades, bringing them back, making Vermont more self-reliant. COVID is our backbone, still is our backbone, and we need to be supporting it more. And I look at agricultural, as supporting them as part of our small businesses, our state. So it's important to me to look at our economy. That's the base of everything that we rely upon. So are kind of glaring from the side at us that they are the budget for them is not
10 seconds.
not there, and that's something that I would also a healthy economy.
All righty, thank you very much, Samantha. Your connection was slowing down a little bit, but I think we got most
the
of
deficits
it.
that we have.
We're going to toss it over
are
to
going to
Kate
come and
MacLean.
hopefully make able to make Vermont affordable, and that everyone can enjoy the beauty of it.
All right, thank you very much. Going over to Kate MacLean with the same question. What is something that hasn't been mentioned tonight that you would like to address through legislation, and how would you build meaningful coalitions to do so?
Gosh, it feels like 2 hours isn't almost enough time for us all to talk about the important issues of Vermont. We didn't reach on broadband or education, but I think the issue most near and dear to my heart is the future of agriculture in Vermont. And it's a gap that I see in the legislation coming out of Montpelier. And I think that agriculture is the heart of the social identity of Vermont, and it is a significant arm of our economy as well. And we see farms closing, specifically dairy farms, but many family farms closing their doors or struggling and trying to stay open. And we need to come up with innovative solutions at a state level to support this future of agriculture in Vermont. If I were in the legislature, I would be bringing young farmers and retiring farmers together at a time where farmers can actually meet, because in the middle of the day doesn't usually work for farmers, and bringing those young and those retiring farmers together to work on those innovative solutions.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Kate MacLean. Over to Rama Schneider. Rama, what hasn't been mentioned tonight that you would like to address through legislation, and how would you build meaningful coalitions to do so? Rama Schneider.
So what I think hasn't been mentioned enough tonight is reimagination, and if we need to reimagine how we're delivering education. We need to reimagine how we're doing our our homes, and how our families are in our homes. We need to reimagine how our relationships within our local communities. I think the legislation that could be done to affect all of that is mostly around setting the support parameters, and setting the goals and the visions, and setting the definites in there, the environmental issues that we're going to take care of, and saying this is what we need to meet. Now we need to help the local communities do this, but none of this is going to happen. The COVID is just hopefully a temporary crisis. The environmental crisis is with us, and it's going to be with us for some time. Even if we were to start doing everything right today, this very moment, we would still be dealing with an environmental crisis, both not just from the weather, but also from all the chemicals and all the other stuff we dump out into our environment on a steady basis. We need to reimagine how we're going to go about doing things. We can keep our free enterprise system. We can keep our democratic institutions. We can keep our constitutional freedoms. All of that we can keep, but only if we're smart and we reimagine our relationships among ourselves and how we go about doing things in our daily lives. There's an awful lot that the legislature will never be able to do, because there's an awful lot that's going to depend on us and our day-to-day activities, and what we do with our neighbors and our friends, our family members, and our fellow board members for whatever committees we happen to sit on, etc. So, I think we need to be more imaginative, and we need to stop thinking about how to go back to the structures of even a year ago at this point. And we need to start thinking about moving ahead to the structures for next year, 10 years, and 20 years out.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Rama Schneider. Over to Susan Hatch Davis. Susan Hatch Davis, what is something that hasn't been mentioned this evening that you would like to address through legislation, and how would you build meaningful coalitions to do so?
Well, I think we have touched on many topics. It may not have been a direct question from you, but through our answers, we've touched on many different things. And one of the things that we haven't really talked that much about tonight is supporting working families. And I think that this pandemic has brought out so many things that show us that our social infrastructure in Vermont is broken, not just Vermont, but across the country. But we're talking about Vermont tonight. So we need to be talking about affordable health care, access to digital information, affordable education, college. And I also think that we haven't talked about lower property taxes and that kind of thing. So I think that I would, when I was a legislator previously, I belonged to the Working Vermonters Caucus, and it was a coalition of nonpartisan legislators from independents, progressives, Democrats, and Republicans. And I think that one thing that I've heard tonight is that we are talking about two parties. We have three major parties in the state of Vermont, and we all need to be working together for the best interest of our constituents. So I guess that's it. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Susan Hatch Davis. Over to Carl Demeraux. What's something that has been mentioned tonight that you would like to address through legislation, and how are you going to build meaningful coalitions to support that goal?
Well, I think like it's already been said. There are a lot of things that we haven't talked about tonight. We haven't talked about the way that we fund education in the state. We haven't talked about the Vermont State College system and the future of VTC and the VSC. We haven't talked too much about broadband and the need to bring that to our rural communities. But I want to thank the Herald and for hosting this tonight, and want to thank you, Dylan, for being our moderator. There is one thing that I'd like to talk a little bit more about, and this is sort of describes in some way my approach to the job of being a legislator. Every vote that I make, I think about how it affects the district. And this past winter, there was a report that was published by the University of Vermont on the way that we weigh our pupils in the way that we fund our education system. It's called the pupil weighting study. And this may seem like a little bit of esoterica for some folks, but it's very important. Those of us who have been noticing or have been looking have seen how over the past 20 years we've noticed that schools in rural and poorer communities of the state have not been doing well. And what the pupil weighting study told us was that the way that we funded education through Act 68 and the way that we fund our rural and poor schools is not equitable. And so one of the things that I would like to do if I'm reelected is to work with other legislators to change that, to fix the way that we weight our equalized pupil calculations in the state and bring more money back to our poorer and more rural school systems. Thank you.
All righty, thank you very much. Okay, there we go. Thank you very much to Carl Demeraux. What is something that hasn't been mentioned this evening that you would like to address through legislation, and how would you build meaningful coalitions to do so?
Well, I think the big thing that hasn't really been talked about is getting back to being a business friendly state, and it will go a long ways to solving a lot of the problems that we are facing right now. Like just a quick example, global warming, and they say our neighboring states have lower carbon emissions than we do. Well, we chased all our businesses out between Act 250 and taxing them and other regulations and requirements. And so now Vermonters, we either have to drive somewhere to get our goods, or we ship our goods out of state to be processed, and we ship it back in. Some people drive up to 2 or 3 hours just to get to work. And sometimes it's in the other states. And, so if we could bring our businesses back in state and have more livable wage jobs here in state, we could cut down on the traffic like our surrounding states have done. And I think that's one thing that we really need to focus on.
We're juggling a few things over here, but we're on to our last question. What is the best way for voters to reach you between now and the election? Starting off with Samantha Lefebvre. Over to Samantha. What's the best way for voters to get in touch with Samantha Lefebvre?
I hope my audio works better this time. And I want to, again, thank the Herald and thank you, Dylan, for hosting this. The best way for voters to reach me, you can either call me at 802-595-0901, or you can visit my website at SamanthaLefebvre.com. And I also wanted to put out that if I am elected, I will be donating 10% of my pay back to Orange County every week that I am in session. So that is me putting putting myself out there that I am invested in our communities, and that I want to represent and be the voice. So I'm hopeful to gain votes and to represent Orange County in our legislature.
All right, thank you very much, Samantha. All righty. And last but not least, what's the best way for voters to reach you between now and the election?
So my home phone number is 802-433-6127. I have a cell phone, 802-793-7526. Email, small letters, RODNEYGRH@AOL.com. And my state email is rgraham@leg.state.vt.us.
All righty.
And I am on Facebook.
All righty. Thank you, Rodney. Thanks for being so flexible and taking another pass at all this. I know it was frustrating for you to not be able to chime in real time, and it was frustrating for us to try and moderate the network connection as well as all the candidates. But I'm glad that you were able to stick around for a little longer and get your 2 cents in on all these issues.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Over to Kate MacLean. Kate, what's the best way for voters to get in touch with you?
You can visit my website, which is kateforstaterep.com. My home phone is 685-7757. My cell phone is 685-1242. And I hope that I can reach many, many voters by calling them in the final month. Thank you so much to everybody for your warmth and your conversation this evening.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Kate MacLean. Over to Rama Schneider. Rama, what's the best way for voters to get in touch with you between now and the election?
So you can go to connectedvermont.org on the internet. That's connectedvermont.org, and there's a contact form and more information about me there. You can call me if you want to. I just hope you don't call me too late in the evening at 433-5441. I'm an early riser, so I tend to go to bed fairly early. I also, let me just throw in the thanks to the Herald for this, and I just want to reiterate my thanks for making the accommodations for Rodney. I think inclusion and fair play count here as much as it counts anywhere else. So, I really want to thank you for doing that part of it. And I just, listen, a vote for me is not a vote to return back to what we had a year ago or 2 years ago. I'm looking forward. When I got on the Williamstown School Board, I looked forward and I helped. I wasn't the only person there doing it, but I certainly helped move things forward and improve the school district and move things into a better position than I found them. And that's my full expectation when I get elected. I'll go down to or up to Montpelier from here, and I will certainly leave the place a lot better than when I found it.
All righty. Thank you very much, Rama Schneider. Up to Susan Hatch Davis. Susan Hatch Davis, what's the best way for voters to get in touch with you?
Firstly, let me thank you, Dylan, and the Herald for hosting this tonight. It's been nice to talk with all the candidates as well. You can reach me at my home, 802-439-5103. I'm on Facebook, Susan Hatch Davis. And I also want to thank the folks in my district for their support as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan Hatch Davis. And last but not least, Carl Demeraux. What's the best way for voters to get in touch with Carl Demeraux between now and the election?
The cell is 505-1867, and don't really get cell service out here, but it does work on Wi-Fi. So you can call there. The house is 439-6731. You can reach me on email at demro4vthouse@gmail.com, or you can go to my website, which is really simple, just carldemeraux.com. And thanks again, Dylan. Thanks to Tim and the crew at the Herald, and I hope that you can find a way to stitch Rodney into the final product here that I'm sure will be up in a day or two. So thank you.
Thank you. We are working on stitching Rodney together just like that. We're going to be touching base with him very shortly. But for now, that does it for this year's series of debates for political candidates across the region. Thank you to all 6 of tonight's candidates, including Rodney, for participating, and thank you to viewers and voters of the White River Valley. With that, we are now 28 days away from the 2020 election. For more information on how to safely vote by mail or in person, contact your local town clerk or visit the Vermont Secretary of State's office website at sos.vermont.gov. Stay safe, stay healthy, wash your hands. Good night and good luck.